Imagine a world where you are not the only human species, where creatures as intelligent and strong as you walk side by side, hunt in the same territories, and even gather around fires during cold nights. But then, something happens. One species disappears forever, while the other dominates the planet. For decades, we believed that Neanderthals went extinct because they were inferior to Homo sapiens, that they were brutish, primitive, and incapable of competing with the intelligence and cunning of our ancestors. But what if that story is wrong? New scientific discoveries reveal a truth that challenges everything we thought we knew. Neanderthals were not simply wiped off the Earth. Their presence still lives within us. What really happened to this species? How did they disappear? And more importantly, could they still exist in some way? Get ready to uncover the shocking truth behind the end of the Neanderthals. A story of survival, mystery, and a fate that may have been very different from what we imagine. Now, to understand what really happened, we first need to know who the Neanderthals truly were. Who were the Neanderthals? To understand the disappearance of the Neanderthals, we first need to know who they really were. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, were not just primitive, clumsy cavemen, as many imagine. They were a human species that dominated Europe and parts of Asia for over 400,000 years, long before Homo sapiens even left Africa. Physically, Neanderthals were different from us. They were shorter and stockier, but incredibly strong, adapted to the harsh cold of the Ice Age. Their skulls were larger, housing a brain that, on average, was even bigger than ours. But does size mean intelligence? That is a question that has intrigued scientists for decades. For a long time, it was believed that Neanderthals were less intelligent than modern humans. However, recent discoveries reveal that they had a complex social life. They made advanced tools, mastered fire, hunted in organized groups, and, perhaps most surprisingly, had burial rituals. A clear sign that they understood death and possibly believed in something beyond life. Additionally, cave paintings found in Spain suggest that Neanderthals had some level of artistic expression, something previously attributed only to Homo sapiens. If this is true, it means that they did more than just survive. They thought, created, and felt. But if Neanderthals were so well adapted and intelligent, why did they disappear? The answer begins to emerge when their paths cross with Homo sapiens. Neanderthals, masters of survival. Neanderthals were not just isolated survivors in a hostile world. They were the true rulers of Europe. For thousands of years they inhabited caves, dense forests, and icy landscapes, facing giant predators and harsh winters. But they didn't just survive, they became masters of their environment. Adapted to extreme cold, Neanderthals hunted enormous animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos, using sharp spears and highly specialized ambush techniques. They lived in small family groups, but also gathered in larger bands to exchange resources, information, and possibly even partners. More than skilled hunters, they were also ingenious builders. Archaeological evidence shows that they used bones and hides to create temporary shelters and mastered fire to cook meat and stay warm during Europe's freezing nights. And what about communication? We still don't know if Neanderthals had a structured language like ours, but their social interactions and organization suggest that, at the very least, they had an efficient form of communication. Studies indicate that their ears were adapted to hearing frequencies similar to ours, reinforcing the hypothesis that they had spoken language. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years without the presence of Homo sapiens. But then something changed. Around 50,000 years ago, a new species began spreading across Europe. Homo sapiens had arrived. What happened when these two human species met? Was it a violent confrontation or a moment of exchange and learning? When Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met for over 400,000 years, Neanderthals dominated Europe without competition. But everything changed when Homo sapiens migrated from Africa. Around 50,000 years ago, the first modern human groups arrived. Spear wounds and bone fractures in fossils indicate that conflicts occurred, but that was not the only interaction between the two species. Genetic testing has revealed something surprising. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred. This means that instead of merely competing, they also coexisted and shared closer ties than previously thought. Scientists have discovered that all humans who are not of exclusively African descent carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. This interbreeding suggests that in some places, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals may have coexisted peacefully for thousands of years. But that coexistence would not last forever. Over time, Neanderthals began to disappear. Something was happening. But what led to their extinction? Was it climate change, diseases brought by Homo sapiens, or did interbreeding eventually dissolve their genetic identity? The answer may be hidden in archaeological evidence that shows how, when, and why the Neanderthals ceased to exist. The extinction of the Neanderthals. Neanderthals dominated Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. They survived harsh winters, deadly predators, and environmental changes. But around 40,000 years ago, something happened. Their population began to decline until, at one point in history, they vanished completely. The big question is, what really caused their extinction? Was climate the real killer? Climate studies show that between 50,000 and 40,000 years ago, Europe underwent drastic environmental changes. The intense cold of the Ice Age caused forests to disappear and be replaced by barren tundras. This dramatically reduced the migration of large animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos, which were the foundation of the Neanderthal diet. While Homo sapiens quickly adapted by diversifying their diet and creating new hunting strategies, Neanderthals struggled to keep up with these changes. Less food led to lower reproduction rates, which may have accelerated their decline. Diseases brought by modern humans. Neanderthals lived in isolation for thousands of years with little exposure to external pathogens. When Homo sapiens migrated from Africa to Europe, they may have brought new viruses and bacteria for which Neanderthals had no immunity. This has happened in more recent periods of history, such as when European explorers brought smallpox and measles to the Americas, devastating indigenous populations who had never been exposed to those pathogens. The same could have happened to Neanderthals, weakening their communities to the point of accelerating their extinction. Was competition the key? Although Neanderthals were extremely well adapted to the European environment, Homo sapiens had social and technological advantages that made them more resilient. They organized trade networks, created more efficient weapons and tools, and, most importantly, worked together on a larger scale. Neanderthals lived in small, isolated groups, while Homo sapiens formed larger, more connected communities. This gave them a better chance of surviving difficult periods and developing new solutions to environmental problems. Over time, a combination of these factors, climate change, disease, and competition, may have been devastating for the Neanderthals. Their population declined until the last groups vanished from history. But did they really disappear? Science has revealed something surprising. Neanderthals still live within us. Our DNA carries traces of this extinct species, influencing modern human traits in ways you might not expect. So tell me, do you think Neanderthal DNA still shapes who we are today? This raises a fascinating question. Do we still carry behavioral traits from the Neanderthals? Could the way we react to the world, feel fear, or even process emotions have been shaped by this genetic heritage? Although Neanderthals disappeared, as a species, their DNA lives on, influencing who we are today. But there are still many myths about them, and it's time to separate fact from fiction. Were Neanderthals dumb? Reality? Neanderthals had a brain as large or even larger than that of Homo sapiens. They developed sophisticated tools, efficient hunting strategies, and even cultural practices like burying their dead. Additionally, were Neanderthals violent and constantly at war? Reality? While conflicts did occur, there is no evidence that Neanderthals were more violent than Homo sapiens. In fact, fossils show signs of care among group members, suggesting that they helped each other recover from injuries and illnesses. The truth is, Neanderthals were not so different from us. They thought, created, adapted, and cared for each other. If they had survived, would we be living side by side with them today? What if history had been different? What if Neanderthals never disappeared? Today, we are the only remaining human species on the planet. But for thousands of years, we were not alone. If Neanderthals had survived, the world would be very different from what we know. We know that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred, leaving genetic traces in us. But what if this mixing had been even greater? Would we now have a society composed of two different types of humans? Perhaps the differences between species would be subtle, like physical and cultural variations, just as different human ethnicities have developed throughout history. We might have cities and societies where humans and Neanderthals lived side by side. If Neanderthals had more time to evolve, could they have developed their own technologies and cultures? Some scientists believe so. After all, they already made tools, had social organization, and even funeral rituals. With more time, they could have developed more advanced forms of communication, more sophisticated dwellings, and even a civilization completely different from ours. Another intriguing possibility: what if Neanderthals became the dominant species? What if, instead of disappearing, Homo sapiens were eliminated or gradually replaced over the millennia? The world could be ruled by a civilization that evolved in a completely different way. But the truth is, we will never know exactly how things could have turned out. What we do know is that, even extinct, Neanderthals left their mark on humanity. And inside each of us, for a long time, Neanderthals were seen as an evolutionary mistake, a species that simply couldn't keep up with Homo sapiens. But science has proven that this narrative was wrong. They were not inferior, they were different. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years, faced extreme conditions, and even left their imprint on modern human DNA. Their extinction was not a simple event. It was the result of a series of factors, including climate changes, diseases, and perhaps genetic assimilation by our species. But in a way, they never completely disappeared. Each of us carries fragments of their legacy. Their strength, their adaptation to the environment, and even behavioral traits may have been inherited by us. And now, the big question: if Neanderthals had survived, what would the world be like today? Would we be living side by side with them? Would we have hybrid societies, mixing culture, technology, and knowledge? Or would we be in conflict over territory and power? The fact is, we will never know for sure. But one thing is certain: the story of the Neanderthals is far from being just a closed chapter of the past. Now, I want to hear your opinion. Did you know that you carry Neanderthal genes? Do you think they could have survived? Leave your comment below and let's discuss this fascinating story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content about the mysteries of humanity. See you in the next video.